How many of you have ever been 16? Raise your hands. How many of you hope to be 16? Raise your hands. How many of you are 16 right now? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, one 16-year-old. Okay, very good, very good. The reason I want to start with a conversation about being 16 is I want to start with a story from my life when I was 16. Now, when you're 16, at least in my day, you got your driver's license, which was amazing. Amazing to have your driver's license. And some kids, they actually had cars. That was amazing too. 16 and you had a car. But that was not my experience. My experience was 16, no car. But I could use Dad's car for dates. So I'm 16, able to drive, no car, but I got Dad to let me have his car. Now, I don't know if you have a father like this, but my father had been a Marine in World War II. He sold life insurance, and his car was a major, major piece of his business. And he kept it absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So, in order to be able to use the car, I had to clean the car on Saturdays so I could have the date that night. And I had to make sure that I kept his rules. Well, he had just one major, major rule. And the major rule was this: you cannot take your date to the drive-in. Now, some of us are going, what's a drive-in? A drive-in is where you actually would drive to a field like this, and there'd be a gigantic screen, and there'd be speakers that were hanging on poles, and you could drive up to the pole and hang the speaker on a window of your car, and you could watch a movie from your car while hundreds of other people in their cars were doing this. It's amazing. Dad did not want me to go to the drive-in with his car because it would get dirty. He wasn't worried about anything else. It was just that it would get dirty. So I had a date one night, and there was nothing playing at the movie house I really liked. And so we went to the drive-in. Now, everything seemed okay. I get back. Sunday's okay. Monday morning, my mom says to me, "Were you at the drive-in Saturday night?" And I said, "What?" I'm prepared to lie to her face at that moment. But I said, "What?" She said, "Were you at the drive-in Saturday night?" "What are you talking about, Mom?" "I know you were at the drive-in Saturday night." Now, here's what was shocking about it. My mom could not drive. So how would she know? She didn't see me pulling into the drive-in. How would she possibly know? And so the moment she expressed that knowledge of me, I had this anxiety and I had this puzzlement. Two things happening inside me at the same time. And I'm wondering, what is going on here? "How do you know?" I finally said, because I had to solve the puzzle. And she said, "I've lived here for 20 years. I have eyes everywhere. Everywhere." And that's how I got busted. Now, I remember that moment because of what it did internally inside me. I had fear and puzzlement as my initial responses. How does she know what's going to happen? So my next question to her, once I finally came clean, was, "Are you going to tell Dad? Are you going to tell Dad?" Now, what I want you to think about today as we transition into Psalm 139 is that to be known is a great appetite and desire inside our hearts. We want to be known. And yet to be known fully and completely creates incredible internal anxiety and fear. And so we are conflicted. We have these two things going on inside us. I want someone to know me, but at the same time, if they know me, what happens next? Psalm 139 is about that. What happens when you actually sit down and take the teaching of the Bible and apply it to your heart? What happens when you think long and hard about its implications? And what's great about this is that this is a psalm that will teach you and I how to take the word and not just know it, but internalize it. This is an example of an individual, David, the psalmist, actually taking a truth and making it so real to his heart that it changes him. That's our longing. It's possible to know more than we apply. It's possible to know more about the Bible than we let inside. And so how do we do that? And this psalm is going to teach us how to do that. So let me just read it to you, and then we'll come back and unpack it and walk through it. It's a pretty easy to outline, 24 verses in the English translation, and each 6-verse stanza is a complete unit, and then the next, and then the next. And we're going to look at the first two, verses 1 through 12, and then we're going to look at verses 13 through 18, then we're going to do 19 through 24, and those are the verses that we're going to look at. And just imagine letting the truth of who God is penetrate inside you and take it personal. Psalm 139, the word of the Lord. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain to it. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the seas, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. For you have formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. Praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eye saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was not one of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they are more than the sand. I awake, and I'm still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. All right. What are we to do with this? Verses 1 through 12 is often used as a foundational passage for the teaching of God's omniscience, which means he knows everything, and his omnipresence, that he's present everywhere at all times. And David's response to that is not a warm devotional thought. You should not read it that way. David is full of fear and anxiety, knowing God knows him completely and fully. He uses powerful poetry, some very powerful poetic devices. One of them is called merism. And merism is when you want to say that something is comprehensive and complete, and you use the extreme opposites. So you might say, well, that's the long and short of it, which means I'm telling you everything. I examined it up and down, which means I looked at everything. And so what he's saying is that you have searched me, examined me, and there's nothing hidden from you, and there is nothing hidden from you. And that is a troubling thought to David, because he knows what God knows about him. He knows what God has seen. And so he says, you know, when I sit down, when I rise up, when I'm vegging in front of the TV watching Netflix, and when I'm on the backyard mowing the lawn, I can't escape you. You know everything I do. You know my thoughts from afar. And again, his response is not a warm devotional thought. His response is, you hem me in. I feel like I'm a city under siege. Where can I go from your presence? Where can I go from your knowledge? Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. The word wonderful probably means in Hebrew more like puzzling to me. It's too hard for me to even fully understand. I can think about it, but I can't fully grasp it. I can't really get my mind around it. And it's too much for me. I'm a city under siege. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. I can't get past it. It's too high. I'm caught, and I can't climb out of the hole I've dug myself into. That's important. That's important to let that sink in. To be fully known. There are no secrets. You know, maybe secret sin on earth is possible, but it's always open scandal in heaven. It's not possible to hide from God. It's not possible at all. In fact, his presence is everywhere, and that's the next verses. And so he starts with two rhetorical questions. He says in verse 7, where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? The answer is, I know there's no place. And again, he uses poetic language to say, well, if I take the wings of the morning, which is representative of the east, and if I fly to the west to the sea, I've got no hope. I can't escape you. I can't fly fast enough. I cannot run fast enough. You can run, but you cannot hide from God. And he's taking that seriously. He's letting that kind of land inside him. Your hand shall lead me. That is, you're going to put me where you want me. It's not like, oh, this is so great, the Lord leads me. This is not Psalm 23, and I have a good shepherd that takes me. This is, I got the God of creation putting his hand on me and moving me where he wants me and where I deserve to be. And that's how the psalm resonates with him. He says, maybe I can hide in the darkness, but even darkness is not dark to you. He actually uses words that sometimes Hebrew scholars are confused by, because he talks about being pounded by the night, being pounded by the darkness. If I pulled it over me like I pulled rocks and buried myself so that no one could see me, you could still see me. That's the God that I must deal with. That's the Lord that I must serve. Now, how is this landing for you? How's it getting inside? When we started the series on Psalms, Dave began with Psalm 1, and Psalm 1 says that the blessed person is a person who meditates on the law, the guidance, the revelation of God day and night. So one of the things that happens, if you will slow yourself down and take the word in and meditate on it, that's what will happen. It will sometimes trouble the dickens out of you. It will stir you up. It will not always be a warm thought, but it will be a challenging, pervasive, fear-inducing thought. Because that's what it's meant to do. That's the truth. That's the God that you and I must deal with. We can't hide. We can't image manage with God. One of my friends, when I was in Lincoln, Nebraska, was a fellow named Randy. He is a world-class high diver. He was a full scholarship athlete at the University of Nebraska, and a tremendous athlete and a deeply committed follower of Jesus Christ. He's overseas now serving in places I can't tell you about because he wanted to serve Christ that way. But one day we had him actually cleaning our church facility, the building, and that was his part-time job when he was in college. And he came in, he rode his bike up, and I happened to be there, and we were buddies. And I said, "So Randy, how's it going?" He said, "I just learned something about myself." "What'd you learn about yourself?" "Well, I was riding my bike here, and I rode through the neighborhood next to the church, and I hit some gravel. And when I hit the gravel, the bike slid out from underneath me, and I fell." I said, "Man, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Well, what'd you learn?" He said, "The moment I hit the ground, I got up, I pulled the bike up, and I looked around to make sure no one saw me." I don't want anybody thinking that I can't ride a bike. I'm an athlete. I compete at the highest level. And I don't want anybody thinking that. So I looked all around. I want to make sure no one saw me. And what did that teach you? That teaches you I'm still pretending that I can hide. I'm still pretending that I can kind of compartmentalize my life and that God doesn't know everything. He said, I still want to play that game. So maybe that's where you're at. That's okay. That's a great place to be. Because the next verses actually move us off of that. So this is when God encircles you, when he gets in your way. But David continues to reflect on the word, and you'll find that he says in verse 18, he has that little word "for." He's been talking about the darkness, and he can't hide from God in the darkness, who sees in the darkness. And that begins him to thinking about, wow, well, God can see in the darkness. What does that mean? And he stops and he meditates on it, and he just kind of puzzles over it, and he lets it get inside. And he says, oh, wow, what's that mean? And it leads him to a reflection about how God made him in the womb. You know, God actually can see in the dark, and so maybe that's how I should think about how I got to be formed in this wonderful meditation. I'm being formed by God as a baby in the womb of a mother, and what it means. He says, you knit me together in my mother's womb. Wow. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Again, he's saying this is puzzling. This is hard to gather. I took cellular biology when I was in college because it was interesting to me, and it was just absolutely fascinating just to see how cells made and what the mechanisms are in cells. And I can only imagine what they know now, and it's stunning, and you really look at what has happened as we look at how we are made, and it is a stunning, amazing thing. And he's seen glimpses of this as it reflects, maybe just on the hand and the bones in his hand and how it works. And so here he is looking at this. He says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made in verse 14. Your works are wonderful. My soul knows that. My deepest element of who I am, that I know that. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret. And then he uses a great term that is stunning, because here's what he says in verse 15. He says, I was intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Again, referring to being formed in his mother's womb. And the phrase that he uses is the same phrase used to describe the artisans that made the tapestries in the tabernacle. This word shows up in Exodus when they're building the tabernacle in the desert, according to the law of Moses. And it was the artisans who came and wove, and they embroidered all of this imagery into the temple curtains. And he said, oh my goodness, I'm a work of art. I am a work of art. He says, so I have a God who knows me and I cannot escape. It scares the bejesus out of me. Now, he goes as, but I'm also a work of art. I'm God's masterpiece. What does that mean? What does that mean? It means your eyes saw when I was still unformed. You have set my destiny. They were formed. My days have been appointed. And he begins to think on this. He says, this is precious. I must be precious. Thoughts, oh God, how vast is the sum of them. And he says, I'm starting to think about you and what you've made and how you've made me. And I fall asleep because I can't sustain it. And I wake up and you're still there. And the truth of you is still there. And I can't exhaust it. It is too much. It is stunning. And this is the turning point in the psalm. He goes from being encircled by God to being embroidered by God. And now he says, I want God's embrace. I want God and I to be together. You remember what were the first words that God spoke in Genesis after the fall? It's always kind of intriguing to think about what happens when a major failure happens and how does God respond to it. And in Genesis, after the fall, the first things that God says, he says three things, actually, 3 sentences, but they're 3 questions. You remember what they are? Adam, where are you? Who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Was God asking questions because he needed knowledge? No, God was just saying, I'm here. My knowledge is not threatening, but you receive it as threatening because you know you're not right with me. And that's how you experience it. And I came to have fellowship with you, and I found you hiding. I want to embrace you. I want to walk with you. I want fellowship with you. And David, I think, maybe is even reflecting on Genesis 3, and I think he's saying, okay, let's do this. I'm on your side. And so he says, if you have enemies, they're my enemies. And this is his expression of loyalty. He says, I'm on your side. I'm with you. And so he says, that's all I want. And so as we look at the last 6 verses here of the psalm, he says, I want to hate those who hate you. I reject who rejects you. They take your name in vain. They're my enemies. I hate them with complete hatred, and I count them as my enemies. I want you to know I'm on your side. Jesus will say things like that too, a little bit. He'll say things to the disciples like in John 15. He'll say, the reason the world hates you is because it hates me. If you're on my side, this is what you get. This is what happens. And then he says, and this is the resolution of the psalm, the meditation. Now he comes back and he says, all right, the thing that caused me to be afraid, I'm inviting it. And so he says, search me, try me, know my thoughts, see if there's any grievous way, lead me in the way everlasting. He's come full circle. Now he wants to step up. He wants to be fully known. I'm open book to you. I'm going to confess. I'm acknowledging what you already know. I want grievous way to be eliminated. The word grievous lots of times talks about any behavior that ruins a relationship. One Hebrew scholar says that he prefers translated as vexing, any vexing way, because vexing is it's ruining our relationship. You're vexing, you're troubling, we're not walking together. And he says, that's what I want. So, what do we do with this? Let me ask some questions that'll help you maybe meditate. Helps me meditate. One of the first questions I ask of Psalm 139 is, where am I at in the psalm? Where am I at in the psalm? Now, let's just be honest. No one here but us chickens, okay? We're just trying to figure it out. You might say, honestly, truly, I don't see myself in this psalm at all. You know, the word doesn't pound on me like this. It doesn't get inside me like this. Yeah, I may be part of this. Maybe I've heard this before. I just have to say, it just doesn't do that for me. That's a good, honest admittance. I don't feel God's presence. I'm not concerned about his knowledge of me. I know that's what the Bible teaches, but it just doesn't land for me. That's an honest thing to say. Say it then. I would say, when you go to bed tonight, if you would sit on the edge of your bed and say, God, this doesn't get inside me at all. I'm not sure you're here or not here. I would say, hey, pray something like, if you're real and you know everything there is about me, show me. Open your heart to God in prayer and just say, hey, whatever, bring it. And I think you'll be surprised, because God is there. You don't sense that. You don't feel that. It doesn't get inside you. A second thing, where are you in the psalm? Maybe you're in this psalm, but you're not at the end of the psalm. Maybe you're in the first 12 verses of the psalm. That's not a bad place to be, because sometimes we need to get past our misconceived notion that we can hide, that God doesn't know. If you're in the first 12 verses, maybe you're feeling something like this. I'm worse off than I ever thought. I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I can hide it from my wife. I can hide it from my kids. I can hide it from my boss. But I can't hide it from God. Things are worse than imagined. I don't know what to do with this. That's not a bad place to be either in this psalm, because this psalm wants you to be in that place. You've got to get to that place where you realize there's nothing that I'm hiding. There's no place where I can run. God is there. That's a great place. Maybe you're in the next verses, the next 6 verses. Now we're talking about verses 13 through 18. Maybe you're in a place where you're starting to realize that you are God's masterpiece. That could be really hard to get to, but once you get there, it can break your heart, because you don't realize how precious you are, how valuable you are, how beautiful you are. God doesn't make junk. You know, we look at the surface, but God looks at it as his embroidered, beautiful art. And he says, you are loved, you are precious to me. Like an artist, I put everything into you, put all of my artisanship and all of my skill in making you. And that can be overwhelming at times when you suddenly realize, my goodness, I'm worse off than I could ever imagine, verses 1 through 12. But I'm more loved and precious than I ever thought possible. And it can stun us. Stay there with that. Hang in there with that. Because that's going to do things. That's going to shape you. That's going to begin to take some of the rebellion out of your heart and the secretness out of your heart, and allow you just to be who you were made to be in the image of God. Maybe you're at the end of the psalm. Now in the last verses, 19 to 24, maybe that's where you're at right now. And you're just saying, I need to commit. I got to go from being the precious artist work of God to becoming one of his, to be on his side. Set aside any grievous way, invite his examination. Here we go. I'm walking with you. I'm on your side. I'll fight with you. I'll be yours. Another question, though, we might ask is this, is where's Jesus in this psalm? In some sense, Jesus is the Lord that David is afraid of. The thing that the disciples realized about walking with Jesus is that he knew the hearts of men. The woman at the well in John 4 was stunned when it seemed that Jesus could tell her everything about her. The early church had a name for God because they had met God in the person of Christ. They used it twice in the book of Acts, and it's the heart knower. God is the heart knower. Jesus is the heart knower. So in a sense, Jesus is the one that is both terrifying and inviting, who knows us and knows us completely. But also in this psalm, Jesus is the perfect king of Israel, the seed of David, because he came to do the Father's will. He came knowing what the Father's will was, and he and the Father were one. And he said, I'm not afraid of the Father. In fact, I'm here to do his will, and I'm going to teach you to do the same. So he would teach us to pray things like, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Know where you're at in this psalm as we kind of wrap things up today. Know that it's possible for words to come out, leap off the page, and do more in our lives than we ever thought was going to happen. Because it will happen that way. As we prepare to kind of close things, let's bow in prayer and ask God, who is present and never surprised by anything that's going on in us or in our hearts. Let's ask him to move us all the way to a place where we want to be on his side. Father, thank you for this day you've given us and this glimpse into the heart of David. We've seen the curtain pulled back and looked into the heart of a human just like us who learned the truth about themselves by learning the truth about you. Dear Father, we pray that you would take us all the way from the anxiety and fear of knowing that we are known perfectly to the place where we know that we are your workmanship and artistry, to the place where we're saying, hey, search me, Lord, know me, bring it. I want to be on your side. I want to be yours. What else could there be in this world but to be in love with the Savior, the creator of the world, one in whom all the earth and creation holds together? Oh, Father, thank you for David's transparent moment and these words that can get inside us. For it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.